With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan. $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
As we continue to keep the theme of aviation, let's welcome to the airwaves retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Dave Willingham. He and I met just a couple of months ago, and it was so interesting to have this conversation that we'll be sharing with the listeners here with the Dr. Sky Experience. Good morning, Dave. Thanks for joining us on this particular evening. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Dr. Sky. How are you, sir?
I am doing great, my friend. I don't know if you heard the other hour, but I thought a very interesting hour with Bill Yenny. So many books that he's written. I mean, he hits the mark. I mean, if we're talking about American exceptionalism, about the young men and women of World War II and other, particular horrible wars, look at the sacrifices. And we talked specifically about the bomber pilots on B-17s, the 24s, the 25s, and we could go on, and the fighter pilots too. But give us a little look-see about yourself. I mean, you have an extensive, I have it here, it would take me the entire show to read every one of your qualifications, but appreciate you here. Just give us a look-see about your background so we can move and share with people about things they may not know and certainly want to know about the world of aviation.
Well, Steve, I'm as you had mentioned before, I was a Air Force pilot, retired as Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force, and went on to retire as a airline pilot. I spent 28 years in the Air Force. I spent 26 years flying there for the airlines. I loved aviation. I loved every aspect of aviation as a small boy. And I said I wanted to pursue that. Take a look at all of your listeners here. It doesn't take a genius to be a pilot. It doesn't take extraordinary person. It doesn't take extraordinary intelligence or aptitude. Mm-hmm. It takes a love of aviation. And I am a solid C student. I am a graduate of a community college and a state school. And I feel like I have achieved that which I desired, and that's to explore as many facets of aviation as I could, and it has been absolutely wonderful. Totally
absolutely.
Enjoyed it.
Congratulations to you and the career that we're about to talk about. And it's so amazing. I mean, looking at some of the aircraft ratings that you have, we'll get into some of these different aircraft, particularly the commercial aircraft, because I'm sure many people out there, a big misgiving might be, and I'm not saying, any individual show doing this or any individual host, but the fear of flying for many. My grandmother, God bless her, would never get on an airplane. She was always fearful her entire life. That's something, of course, that maybe many people have. But tell us, this is a fact now of all the vehicle of transportation, whether we talk about driving cars, riding motorcycles, doing that. Tell me what you told me off air about the relative safety of aviation overall. Let's hear that from you. This is important.
Well, sure, Steve. You've heard this coined before, and it's that you're much, much safer in the aircraft than you are driving to the airport. And wow. Statistics really, really bear that out. Aviation in its infancy used to be a hot rod, daredevil game. And then through the decades, as we've become much more smarter and do the job much more efficient and have spent millions of hours from engineering to piloting to research and development on the aircraft, things have gotten better and better and better and better. But we still never have to forget that it's still a miracle that we can actually fly and turn it into such a mundane experience. So it is, once again, much safer in the aircraft than it is driving to the airport.
No, it's a well-made statement, and it's factual. I mean, you back it up. There's backup information on this. Department of Transportation, I'm sure other agencies around the world. And, of course, when airplanes do auger in, as Chuck Yeager always told me when we did an interview, he said they don't crash. He said they auger. But regardless, your point is well made here. And this is an interesting conversation because if you look at the history of aviation, and we look at exactly when it was started, allegedly here in the United States, Dave, 122 years since Wilbur and Orville Wright made these flights. I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, you sit in the seat, left, right seat, you know, all throughout your career, the pilot, the co-pilot, flight engineers. I mean, isn't it just totally a mind-blowing experience to see what they did then and what we have now, 122 years later? That isn't all that much time in the course of history, right? It's amazing.
No, it's not that much time at all. In fact, that's powered flight, manned-powered flight. I'd call it manned-maneuvering flight. Of course, the Wright brothers have gotten much of the credit for that, and as well they should have, because they actually developed the science behind the flight. However, the French and the Russians, they all were studying flight. They were using flight in hot air balloons, lighter than air, 100 years before that. But once again, we're talking about manned maneuvering flight to where it's actually a science, and it's equitable. You can actually plan something versus just drifting on the wind.
Interesting. You know, ladies and gentlemen, as we consider, and we certainly welcome dialogue to this particular show, the Dr. Sky Experience. We love dialogue. If you have questions or comments to our special guest here in hour number 2, the contact number, 1-800-848-9222, simply 1-800-848-9222. And if I may just call you Dave, we'll continue on to discuss these various interest areas that we have. But one of them, knowing that you are a seasoned helicopter pilot with the ratings and credentials, let's go back to something that's very fresh in my mind and a very sad moment in American aviation history. Let's go back to January 29th, 2025. As many people may or may not know, reliving the experience of the American Airlines Bombardier CRJ-700, Flight 5342, in a collision with a U.S. Army UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. I remember it. You remember it. People out there listening remember this. You see this rather fuzzy video showing a helicopter, which looked like a helicopter with its lights, and an aircraft on descent. Describe that whole experience as what happened there, and not to lay blame here. I mean, that's certainly not my intention. Describe the environment there, because that's a very heavily trafficked area, right? Correct? Obviously, in the nation's capital.
It is, Steve. And I feel very comfortable about talking with this one specifically because I've seen it from both sides.
Okay.
And when I used to fly with Pan American World Airways, we're flying 727s. We'd fly into Reagan National, and at that time it was just National Airport. The approaches, I would fly in that as a fixed-wing jet pilot. And then later on in life, I've been flying the Black Hawk helicopters with the Air Force, called Pave Hawk helicopters.
Yes. And
I was on the flip side of that coin, where I was now the helicopter coming down south on the Potomac, and I was seeing all the aircraft landing on Reagan National. I have to tell you, at the time, and I will not place any blame on any of these events.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I won't point fingers because it's not just usually not just one event that causes a crash. It's a series of events that have failed.
Right, and we're not the NTSB, obviously, so we're not going to go down that path. Right.
Yeah, and this one, so with Brasher, actually, there's an investigation still going on. But the fact was, there was 2 pilots and a crew chief on that Black Hawk. It was Captain Rebecca Lobach. There's a CW2, Chief Warrant Officer 2, and I think it was Andy, I can't even remember, Andy Eves, and then there's a Sergeant O'Hare, which was the crew chief. And
sure.
The experience level in that aircraft was Rebecca had, she was 28 years old, had about 450 hours. Andy was 39 years old. He had about almost 1,000 hours. And the crew chief, Ryan, he had almost over 1,000 hours. So experience level, and I have to tell your viewers, it's apples and oranges, because an hour in a helicopter most helicopters you're hands-on all the time. You don't have a few helicopters have autopilots, but generally you're flying in a tactical environment below 500 feet. You're working both feet and both hands and usually your mouth at the same time. So it's very labor intensive. So 1 hour flight time in a helicopter is equal to about 10 hours of flight time in a jet, where you just get up to cruise, throw the autopilot on, and take a nap.
Wow. Never knew that. So it's an intensive environment. In other words, you got to be really paying attention to everything. And it kind of can tire you out if you slip away. Right.
It is. And you have to make a helicopter fly. Airplanes are inherently stable. That means you can go in there, you can start the engine up. I could get into a Cessna or a jet. You start it up on the ramp, and you point it in an open field. You push the throttle up, and if it's trimmed up right, the thing will bounce around, and eventually it'll kind of take off and wander off somewhere and splat itself. But helicopters, you hop in it, you run the throttle all the way up, and it'll just sit there until it tears itself apart or runs out of fuel, one of the two. You got to make that thing fly. Mm-hmm. So, and it's pretty busy, and it's very busy on helicopter. You're, like I said, you're using all your appendages. In the other jet, there was I believe that American jet, it was a CJ-700, Jonathan Campos. Now, he had 4,000 hours. He was 34 years old. Sam Lilly was the first officer, and he was 28 years old and had 2,500 hours. So you look at them, they have like 6,000, 7,000 hours between them. Mm-hmm. It was truly unfortunate. They were given a approach to runway 1, which is the north-south runway. And generally speaking, if they took and maintained that approach on the runway 1, they would have had this lateral deconfliction where the helicopter would be flying on the east side of the Potomac and the jet would be on the west side of the Potomac, and both going in opposite directions. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, this time, they were given a visual approach and told to execute an approach to runway 33, which is basically about a 30-degree offset. They had to jink to the right, and then they make a left turn. And their final approach course runs right across the flight path of that helicopter.
It sure
and I
does,
remember
right?
at the helicopter, I remember being in a Black Hawk coming down the Potomac, because we had a sister unit up in Suffolk, New York. We constantly fly it back, exchanging aircraft and doing different missions. And I just thought, I was coming down, and you hear the controller at Washington National say, "Hey, you need to come and anchor at this point, hold until this traffic is clear." And looking at it and thinking, that aircraft, that jet aircraft, has to cross exactly right in the glide path of a helicopter on a low-level route, and they're both doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And it was a terrible, terrible TERPed-out approach, and TERPS is short for its terminal approach procedures. And I just thought, what a recipe for disaster that is. And it's been a testament over the years to controllers, to pilots, to the air traffic control system, that the situational awareness and the professionalism of these folks who speak up and say, I don't like that, I'm going to hold here, I'm going to spin left, or I'm going to break the approach off, I'm going to go around. And that has been able to negate accidents, unfortunately.
Well, it's a very sad state of affairs. I mean, look, again, without placing blame, we're not the NTSB. We're not here to do that. That would be wrong, because I, especially myself as host, I have no knowledge of this. You're a pilot. But here's the interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions, I mean, this is a very sad moment in aviation history. That on the date of this past, January the 29th. Our number here, 1-800-848-9222, a generality of questions you could be asking all about these subjects. And maybe you know a little bit about this particular incident that we're talking about right now. Sad, but true. But let me ask you this, as if you would look at this, and the viewers, because radio's in the mind of, it's like a theater of the mind, of course. It's not television. But if you look at it like a three-dimensional pipe, in other words, that helicopter path has to be exactly, you can't waver from that. Is that what I'm understanding? And that the aircraft coming in have their own three-dimensional path. So you get trouble if those two collide. So what would it be? A difference of altitude with somebody in the equation? Not to lay blame. Was the helicopter factually too high, too low? What would you say on that as compared to the regular jet airliner coming in?
Well, the jet airliner has less maneuverability at that time. Jets fly fast and they fly high. But they have to come in and land, they have to take off, so they have to fly in that regime anywhere between 0 to 1,000 feet. Well, 0 to 500 feet is where helicopters live. That's the helicopter regime. They fly in a slower area. They fly much lower to the ground. Their main thrust is, hey, we don't want to hit something coming up from the ground. We don't want to hit a pole, another aircraft, another helicopter. We don't want to hit a kite flying out there, a balloon. There's so many obstacles that are under 500 feet that's their main thrust is to do that. So in this type of case, you have to deconflict. It has to be the terminal approach has to be changed, and you either have to change the lateral offsets to where you don't have that potential for this crossing at that very, very, very close, tight tolerance. And the news has said a lot about, well, this helicopter is off by 125 feet, and there's been all counterpoints on the news too that the tolerances are really 75 feet plus or minus on your altimeters. You have to be 75 feet plus or minus each altimeter, and then also with the elevation of the field when you take off. That's one of the items that you check. But that's a barometric altimeter. And at 500 feet, most, if not all the time, you're looking at your radar altimeter. Now, radar altimeter actually is another altimeter. It gives you your AGL, or your altitude above the ground level. Okay. And you're much more concerned about that because that represents an obstacle below your aircraft, i.e. the ground coming up or something, a structure down below you. You want to make sure that you have ground clearance because you don't want the ground to come up and smack you. Then that would be your bad day. Mm-hmm. But a barometric altimeter, although you do pay close attention to it, especially in a very tight environment like that, in that Class B airspace and the corridors that fly below it, you do have tolerances. And we don't know if they were distracted. We don't know if I know that
just a sad event, right? A very sad event in aviation. Helicopter and a commercial jet. Yes,
you do. And you're flying, and it's like your self-survival technique is, especially flying at night. Now, remember, this is not go-to-color day, and they said they were on and off goggles, which are the night vision goggles.
Correct.
As you're flying, it could be they may have got a bounce on the radar altimeter, but you naturally want to climb a little bit. It's kind of a self-preservation technique. And generally speaking, that saves your life. In this situation, it placed them in a position where they were in direct conflict with another aircraft. So it's very sad that happened.
Absolutely. No, the memory of those souls will never be forgotten. But like we said, and we'll repeat it again, we're not the NTSB. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to understand from people like yourself who know this as far as being a pilot and a well-seasoned one. If you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience, to the top of hour number 2, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel David Willingham. He's joining us as a follow to the conversation we just had with author Bill Yenny on his great aviation books. The whole subject matter as we transition, ladies and gentlemen, back to more of our main themes: astronomy, space, aviation, and weather here on the Dr. Sky Experience. But closer to home, we only have a few minutes, Dave, before the bottom of the hour, and if I'm not doing justice or not giving you the time, I apologize, but in New York City, the horrific helicopter crash with the tourist that came from overseas. The bottom line on that tourist helicopter, as I like to describe it, there's something they call, and I don't know if this is the correct term, forgive me, and ladies and gentlemen, if it's called the wrong thing, but something in the helicopter world was called the Jesus nut on top of that rotor mast. Is that effectively correct? And was that possibly a reason that helicopter went down, because some loose parts on top of the mast? Just curious.
It very well could be. You're talking about to bring your readers up, your listeners up to speed. You had basically a mid-air breakup. It didn't hit anything. Did not hit another structure or aircraft out there, and that's a very, very rare event to have happen. Normally, the structure of aircraft, helicopters, anything flying, has been tested to the point where it's pretty darn reliable. But things happen. There's a couple axioms that says if you can get it off the ground, you can crash in it, and if you can fly in it, you can crash in it. Mm-hmm. So in this particular case, it looks like there's a structural failure. And at that point in time, when they had a massive failure like that in the airframe, there's nothing you can do. You're along for the ride. The best pilot in the world, Chuck Yeager, could be behind that stick. Mm-hmm. And that you just had your bad day. Your luck ran out that day. So
Yes.
Once again, poor souls on that one.
Well, in the mind's eye, ladies and gentlemen, since obviously radio's theater of the mind, the dynamics of flight characteristics is so different because I've yet to see, other than some of these horribly gigantic, monstrous Russian helicopters that they built that look like they had stubby wings, but the bottom line is, without being ridiculous, I don't see too many helicopters that have massive wings for flight support. So you're right. So the dynamics of that. And really quick, before we hit the bottom of the hour break, that little tiny propeller in the back, isn't that to keep the whole fuselage from spinning around in a circle? So it maintains its what? Stability? Is that a simple way to describe that little rotor that's in the back, the tiny little thing at the tail?
That's a great description of it, Captain Sky. And what that is on a conventional helicopter, you have one main rotor right above you, and that provides torque. And if we learn for high school physics that when you spin an item one way in a rotation, you have an equal and opposite action or motion that wants to happen below you. See, the helicopter wants to turn the other way that the rotor's turning. So Igor Sikorsky came up with this great, said, I'll take another fan, I'll tap off the power, and I'll make that fan 90 degrees and opposite to the directional spinning of the aircraft, and then we'll just blow air that way, and we'll stop that torque from happening. That's a very oversimplistic way of saying it. But there are other helicopters out there that don't have tail rotors, but they usually have two rotors that counteract each other's torque. So
totally amazing.
You have to negate the torque somehow.
And we've seen them in the Phoenix PD here out in Arizona. I'm sure other places of days gone by. The Notar helicopter, which as you described so well and accurate, did not have that little tiny propeller. It uses bleed gases, I guess, to stabilize the fuselage, which is quite an interesting concept.
That's right. Basically, it's a ducted fan, and they just turn that duct at the end of that tube to the direction where you need to not turn, and that provides that anti-torque force.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. No question is too difficult for our special guests as we bring you in many, many ways, ladies and gentlemen, per the Dr. Sky email, drsky@wabcradio.com. Not every guest that you recommend will get on the air, but we certainly talk about that. And if you'd like to send us an email, we appreciate it. Much more when we come back. We're going to talk about what it's like to fly some of these commercial aircraft, maybe from the way that you never heard because you were sitting in the seats and they're up in the front doing what they do best. More with retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel David Willingham. He's joining us, and proud to have him and call him a friend here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back after these important announcements as we bring you the last half hour as we move to hour number 2.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
32 minutes after the hour, we're continuing with our special guest on the Dr. Sky Experience, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Dave Willingham. He's joining us here. Dave, welcome back. Very interesting to hear from the astronauts who walked on the moon. So many wonderful experiences that we have here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Thanks for being with us again, and I know it's maybe late for you, but we, again, appreciate your time. Let's continue to talk about the different type of aircraft ratings. And this is something many people out there may never experience because you get on the commercial airplane and maybe sometimes the captain and co-pilot will say hi. You know, my experiences with certain airlines, they'd greet you and you could actually stick your head in the cockpit area, but that was a short-lived experience. You've rated on the Boeing 777, the MD-11, the MD-10, the DC-10, the L-300, in case people don't know, I call it the old C-141 Starlifter, retired in 2006, the Learjet, which is an amazing story, and the R-22. So of all of these, I got to ask you as an aviator in the commercial world, which one did you really find the biggest affinity for as far as ease, maybe the fun of flying it, and your experience? What would you say?
Well, Doctor, that's a tough one. Every single aircraft was fun to fly. And they each had their own fortes. They each had their own drawbacks.
Yes.
My last airplane I was flying was the 777, and what a dream to fly that. It was a real pilot's airplane. That's because that was at the tail end of years and decades of research. They had human factors built into that. The people who we stand upon their shoulders are the ones who were the pioneers in aviation. And they're the ones who had found all the flaws and the mishaps. We're the beneficiary of flying comfortable, really reliable aircraft and having a very great air traffic control network, basically globally. So many people that. So yes, the 777 was awesome. The MD-11 was a magic carpet, took me all over the world. Same thing with the triple. Those are all strategic aircraft. The 141, once again, that was what I cut my teeth in. And that took me all over the world too. What a fantastic way for young men and young women to travel all over the globe and to fly themselves. It's a plug for the Air Force. It's a plug for the armed forces.
Yeah, amazing.
It builds character. It builds self-reliance. And it really is a magic carpet to the entire world. And, man, it was fun to fly it all. We did not just strategic flying in the 141. We also did drops. We open up and push paratroopers out, did cargo drops. It's different than flying fighter aircraft or fast-moving aircraft. Once again, the MD-11s, the DC-10s, very large aircraft. They're global. You just learn you go to so many different.
No, it must be amazing to fly these. But on an astronomical note, you probably know this. That C-141 of one of its iterations was used as the Kuiper Airborne Observatory long before the Sophia plane that we were privileged and honored to fly on as guests in media. But the reason I wanted to mention that, going back to the 777, maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but on these aircraft, I watched these videos from a guy on Facebook called Captain Bob. And I don't know how this guy has a life. I don't know if you've ever seen him, but people should check him out. Have you ever seen him, Dave? This is interesting. Captain Bob.
I've seen one or two of them, but he is a very interesting fellow.
But what he does, he'll take you on a tour. I don't think he's ever home. He probably doesn't have a home life because he's always transporting airplanes to different places where they can strip them down or somebody bought one. But here's the thing I want to ask you about. Many people may not know this. On maybe every 777, I don't know, but he goes back to the back where you think there's a lavatory, and he has this little door that he opens, and he goes upstairs, and there's like an entire area for where the flight exchange crew can actually sleep. I never knew they had that, but then again, I don't fly 777s. Is that true on most of those 777s? They have a little area where you can sleep that nobody knows you're up there.
There is. It's based on the configuration of the aircraft. I was flying the Foxtrot models, or the 777-200F, which was the freighter models. And we actually had dedicated bunks there. We had two bunks, and we had first class seats that we could go back there and rest. And you actually, when you fly 16-hour legs, you fly double cruise, and one crew's up flying, the other one's resting.
I would imagine you need some sleep. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the other models, so other major airlines fly their passengers. Yeah, they have dedicated sleep areas too. So people should feel very good about that, and they know that their pilots are up there getting rest, because when they need it during the approach, you don't want some sleepy eyes behind the yoke.
Somebody said this. I'm not reading this, and I wonder if you could corroborate, see if I'm right. Somebody once told me, and I think it was Joe Sutter, who we had an interview with before he passed, the designer of the 747 from Boeing, said something like the old iteration of the 747, like the 200 model, he said it uses about a gallon of fuel every minute, or is it every second? Because if they're using that much fuel, it's out of my budget. So imagine that. Yeah. Well, what kind of fuel consumption, let's go back to your aircraft, that a 777 would consume if you looked at it in a short period of time? Any idea?
Yeah, well, actually, just do some quick math. A 777, our 777s had a range of about 8,000 miles. The fuel we take on about 48,000 gallons of fuel. Sure. To get that far. And when we took off, we weighed almost 750,000 pounds. So you just divide take 48,000 gallons divided by 8,500 miles, and there you go with that answer.
What mileage? That's not the best mileage, but I guess you got a lot of weight there. Oh, incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight, but people want their stuff, and they want it there at 0.87 Mach.
They sure do. And how dare any airline lose their luggage, right? Oh, God, but it's not. See, a lot of people bring too much stuff on the airplanes. Wouldn't you agree, pilot? I mean, you have people bringing, a horse on board, or they'll bring a giant, I don't know, they got too many things, and then they hold the whole flight up, right? Isn't that incredible? That's true.
Yeah, it depends how the operation of that either the freight or the passenger is.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes if they don't have rigid rules about how to do things and what you can bring on, you can see things they get gummed up pretty hard. So
1-800-848-9222, still an opportunity for you, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of dialogue to give us some questions and comments, or make a statement about aircraft or some things you want to know. Our special guest, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel David Willingham. He's kind enough to join us for the hour. Let's take this one in a few moments. You're flying the Boeing 777. What people may not know about that particular aircraft, you're the pilot, let's say, and the co-pilot. Walk us through some of the things that they're doing with the pre-check, because a lot of people, you see the pilots are people walking around outside, and it's not just the, very important baggage handlers, thank God for them. What's some of the pre-flight things that people need to know about so they understand what's going on up front or around the airplane before you leave?
Sure. We'll just bring this in a synopsis. And we'll try to condense a very long flight into just 1 minute here. Mm-hmm. So the flight starts in the ready room, or it starts in base operations. And by that means that the pilots will be in checking the weather. They'll be checking the NOTAMs, which are notices to airmen that lets them know what's going on, if there's any outages, if there's any facilities down, what's up, what's running, what's not. Some important stuff gets fed to the air crew. It's by a dispatcher, and the dispatcher is also usually a rated pilot. And that's their job. They will feed all that there to make sure that that crew has the most up-to-date information for their flight, wherever they may go.
Sure.
So with that being said, you head out to the aircraft. Once you get to the aircraft, usually you have division of duties, and that's the base. It's going to be brought about by the operator. Will have their standards of operation. One pilot will do a walk-around. They'll walk around, make sure that all the parts and pieces are on the aircraft. This is in addition to what maintenance will do. Mm-hmm. Maintenance will get prepped to jet prior to the crew coming out. So one aircraft will be walking around. As a passenger, you may see a pilot walking around with a flashlight out there at nighttime, or at the time he'll have a little vest on, or she'll have a little vest on. And then the other pilot is up in the cockpit. They're getting ready. They're presetting the frequencies. They're turning all the computers on. They're setting the gyros up. They're putting the positions in the navigation computers. They're loading the routes in the flight management computers. Then they merge. Both pilots merge up there. They'll run pre-flight checklists, and that means they'll get the aircraft ready to cockpit, ready for the start, and ready for the taxi. Okay, and one of the very important things I don't want to gloss over is that even though you have standards, you'll also have what's called a pre-flight briefing. The captain will usually brief the crew as to how he wants to operate that aircraft, what's expected out of them, and then how to delineate the duties. He'll also take input from the crew and make sure that the crew is properly rested, and to see if there's any issues that will affect the flight, and then he can either work around it or deal with that as it may happen. They'll run the checklist. They'll start the motors, taxi out, take off, hopefully very uneventful. We always try to keep it boring, and then boring flights are good. You fly in the most economical means to your destination. That usually means you climb up to somewhere between 30,000 to 40,000 feet, fly to your destination. You do a descent. All this time, you keep on getting all this information. You're getting electronic information fed to the aircraft about your weather, about your flight conditions, about the state of the aircraft, about conditions on the ground. So once again, that crew is taking all this information in, and they're executing the approach, the landing, and then after the landing, you run some more checklists, and that means that you're running basically the power, the no-fly checklist. We're not going to fly anymore, so we better start gearing the airplane down. You're taxiing in. As you pull into the chocks are in, you put the power on the aircraft, and then the crew will run a shutdown checklist, and then the passengers are usually getting about ready to get up and get out.
No, it's amazing. You've done a yeoman's job of explaining this in such a short time before we go to the break here. But no, not to cut you short on this. This is fascinating to make the statement once again that of all the forms of transportation, your statement is absolutely, valid, and I believe it seriously because I've read this too, that still aviation, meaning commercial aviation, is still considered what? The safest of all these modes of transportation, and it goes by the number of flights to the number of hours flown. And obviously, that's an important statement. Dave, we're coming up on that break, the last one of this particular hour. Still time, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions or concerns about aviation, civil aviation, commercial aviation, and all other aspects of what we're talking about, the people who fly these airplanes, you really don't get a chance to talk with. Here is your opportunity, 1-800-848-9222. And we'll be right back. And thanking you, ladies and gentlemen, around the nation, around the world, listening to this archival program that you'll find in the podcast section at WABCRadio.com, so you can listen to it in perpetuity. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We continue with our very special guest as we move to the top of the hour. Retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Dave Willingham. He joins us to the top of the hour, ladies and gentlemen. And let's see now. Let's go to the callers. I want to make sure we have the caller list correct here. Good morning, Bill in Manhattan. Your question or comment. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to ask your guest what he thinks about Doppler radar, in particular, its ability to prevent or curtail wind shear by avoiding that. It's been implicated in at least several major airline crashes, and I was wondering whether it would be cost-effective to require them, to mandatorily install them all, something like that. I'll leave it at that.
Great question, Bill. Thanks for joining us. That's amazing, isn't it? That's a good one.
It is. Hi, Bill. This is Dave Willingham. We have actually there are in the airliners up to date. We have wind shear, and we have the ability to detect a wind shear condition, and it pops up on the radar. These things are actually built in. Now, a Doppler radar is usually associated with the ground-based radar. You see it like with the Channel 7 or Channel 11 news. You'll see it's the Doppler shift, and that'll give you the velocity of the molecules out there. But that gives you a hint as to what the particles in the rain are doing and the wind. But we actually do have wind shear alerts, and you'll get them. And we don't like wind shear in aircraft at all. It's to be avoided, and it has causes accidents in the past. It will cause accidents in the future, but we're doing a really good job of being able to identify it and avoid it. So almost every pilot you'll see about trying to avoid those things. We do have those on board the aircraft. They do work. I've gotten the warnings. I've avoided it, and it has saved lives. So that was a very excellent question.
Bill in Manhattan, thank you. I appreciate you. We're going to move forward. We got a full board of callers here. Let's say good morning to Joaquin in Pennsylvania. You're on with our special guest, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Dave Willingham. How are you this morning?
Yes, good morning. Oh, I'm doing so-so, but I actually had two questions. One is an observation. It seems that in the past that a lot of our rock stars and musicians that died in plane crashes, it almost seemed to be relevant to the amount of times that they actually, flew. That was the first observation. And actually, too, I guess when it comes to fear of flying, it's a matter of the thought of being up in the sky and you only got one place to go, and that's down in an uncontrolled fall. But my actual question...
Okay, go ahead.
I think it was regarding the Boeing MAX 737. When they designed that airplane, from what I understand, they put a motor on that was way too big, and basically in order to fly that plane, it really has no aerodynamics that it has to be trimmed by computer.
Well,
go ahead.
What's your question on that one, Akeem?
Well, no, I mean, in other words, most of the commercial aircraft, at least prior to that one, they basically had a glide ratio to them. But it seems that the 737 MAX wouldn't have a glide ratio because in order to trim the plane, it's done by computer.
The glide ratio is not dependent upon the power plant. It's dependent on the wing form. So it does have a good glide ratio, and you'd really be surprised at 747s, DC-10s, 767s. They all will glide pretty well. They're pretty clean, very clean, efficient wings. However, we try not to glide in powered aircraft. The motor, the motors that they put on the aircraft I have not heard any type of statistics on that. I can't speak authoritatively since I didn't fly the Max. So I think that the wing form didn't change. The motors, they just make the airplane, go up, go fast, and they slow the baby down. So,
yes. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the answer.
Yeah.
I want to mention this, Joaquin. We got to move forward. I'm sorry to cut you short, but I did have on here for everybody else to go back through our archives. We had none other than Artemis Pyle, the drummer from Lynyrd Skynyrd. And boy, does that a story, Dave, of course, as our guest. And Joaquin, that's amazing story about he helped save so many of the people on a piston-driven airplane that they never should have taken off in, but that's a whole nother story. Joaquin in Pennsylvania, always a privilege and honor to have you here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's go to Mark in upstate New York. We'll try to get as many callers as we can before the candle burns out. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Very great show every weekend.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question. This Thomas Fitzpatrick landed two planes in 1950s, 56 and 58, on a New York City street. It's an amazing. It was amazing, and it's not all a great story. He was drunk, but my question is, the Colonel, how much navigational equipment do you think he was relying upon, or was that just such a amazing? I mean, it was an illicit flight, but it was amazing. I guess 100,000 to 1. They said the first time, so to do it twice, I don't even know what the odds would be.
I'm not even sure, Mark. Do you know, Dave, about anything about that? I mean, but if you're drunk, I guess it's luck then, right?
I think that there's not a bunch of navigation units that actually are made to navigate your way down to land on a major road versus an aerodrome. So I imagine he's using a lot of visual flight rules on that one, and he's probably flying by the seat of his pants, and maybe he was drunk and that helped him out. I'm not sure.
Mark, I love the fact that you brought in drunk. Yeah, drunk is not a way to fly, but that was luck, don't you think, Mark, in upstate New York? That's pretty bizarre.
That was the condition of the whole event. That's all I was saying.
I hear you. Yeah.
Landing a plane in New York City street.
That's amazing.
But thank you very much.
Our pleasure, Mark. Always appreciate you. And thanks for being part of the Dr. Sky Experience. We've got about 5 minutes, Dave, and I don't know. This is interesting. I want to do this again with you if you'll be so kind to agree to us and you carry this on. Sadly, and I wanted to say, I know time doesn't permit here, but your analysis of Air India Flight 171, this happened just June 12th, as you all know, the first time a Boeing 787-8, the Dreamliner as it's known, has this horrific situation where everybody except for one person gets out alive. For that particular situation, there's a lot of controversy about if they shut off the power to the engines. If they did, how did it happen? What do you know? And apparently, seat 11A seemed to be the life-saving seat for this individual. He got out with a few bruises, but everybody else perished. What do you think about that? I mean, I know it's not enough time to do justice, but your analysis from what you think we know in the world today and what you might know.
Sure. Doctor, I think you asked a couple of questions right there, but I'll try to answer those.
No, I know. It's a lot of stuff.
First, 787s, they don't just have dual engine failures like that at low altitude. So there's a precipitate on that, and it's pointing towards the human factors. We talked about why airplanes crash. Sometimes, I'm not saying this event, sometimes it's intentional. And human beings are flawed. We do an outstanding job about picking the right people to go fly, vetting them, training them, evaluating them on a regular basis. Sometimes humans break, and this has happened several times for whatever reason, whether they be the person has a criminal reason to do it, i.e. 9/11. We've had at FedEx, we had Auburn Calloway who took a life insurance policy out of himself and tried to take over a DC-10, crashed into the hub, killing him, doing suicide basically for insurance. So sometimes crashes are intentional. In this case, the indicators are pointing towards that there was some intentional way a reason to shut those engines down. We don't know. I don't know. I won't even speculate on that because the investigation is still going on. And then as far as actually surviving. You know, what is the lucky seat? You can go down to the store and buy a lottery ticket. You know,
right.
Sometimes your number pays off.
It's amazing.
And there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes some people be sitting right next to them. They die and that person lives.
Right. But still, the safest form of transportation. I hate to cut you short, and of course the apology is sincere. And to anybody else that was trying to get in, we'll continue this dialogue. Thank you, Sir Dink. Thank you, Dave, as we call you a friend. We'll look forward to having you on the program in the future, if you so desire, to talk about the wonders of aviation and how it's still the safest mode of transportation. Thank you, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power and advanced Audi tech. The next chapter of Audi is here.
Buying a car in Carvana was so easy. I was able to finance it through them.
Whoa, wait, you mean finance?
Yeah, finance. Got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan, entered my terms, and shot from thousands of great car options, all within my budget.
That's cool, but financing through Carvana was so easy.
Financed. Done. And I get to pick up my car from their Carvana vending machine tomorrow.
Financed.
Right, that's what I said.
You can spend time trying to pronounce financing, or you can actually finance and buy your car today on
Carvana.
Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.